Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance as red warning lights flashed across every console, and the communication officer turned toward him with a pale face that told him this was not going to be good news at all. The message came through the main speakers with a voice that sounded like grinding metal, mixed with the whisper of wind through dead leaves, and Jake knew immediately that this was not from any human source because no human could make sounds like that even. With the best voice modulators they had, Admiral Lisa Carter received the same message 3 hours later, while she was reviewing supply reports in her office on Luna Station, and she dropped her coffee cup when she heard the words that would change everything for humanity forever. The Galactic Council demands the immediate presence of all human representatives at Zentara Prime to answer for crimes against galactic peace and the violation of sacred laws that have kept order in this galaxy for 10,000 years. Jake read the full message transcript twice before he understood what it really meant, and when he did understand it, he felt something cold settle in his stomach, because the Galactic Council had never called any species to account like this before, and everyone knew what happened to species that the Council decided were problems. The journey to Zentara Prime took 14 days through hyperspace, and Jake spent most of that time studying everything humanity knew about the 3 species that made up the triumvirate, which was not very much because they rarely spoke to younger species. Except to give orders, Admiral Carter arrived at the massive crystal structure that housed the council chambers, and she had to crane her neck back to see the top of the building that seemed to stretch up into the purple sky of Zentara Prime, like a mountain made of pure light. The inside of the building was even more impressive, with walls that seemed to be made of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light and corridors so wide that a small spacecraft could have flown through them without touching the sides. When the doors to the main chamber opened, Carter saw 3 beings that represented power older than human civilization, and she felt very small standing before them, even though she commanded fleets that could destroy planets. The first was a Valdari whose body seemed to be made of shifting silver liquid, and whose eyes were empty black holes that Carter could feel, looking directly into her thoughts without permission. The second was a Koresh that looked like a walking collection of insects all moving together as one being, and when it spoke, the sound came from 1,000 tiny mouths all speaking the same words at exactly the same time. The third was a Zephyrian that had no solid body at all but was just pure energy, contained in a field that made the air around it shimmer, like heat waves rising from hot concrete on a summer day. The Valdari spoke first, and its voice appeared directly inside Carter's mind without using her ears at all, which made her feel sick and violated in a way she had never experienced before. Humanity has violated the sacred decree of submission that requires all species to surrender their weapons and submit to council authority within 100 years of first contact, and this violation cannot be allowed to continue. Carter found her voice even though her throat felt dry, and her hands were shaking slightly as she faced beings that could probably destroy her with a thought. If they chose to do so, Earth's government was never informed of any such decree, and we have acted within the rights of any free species to defend ourselves and explore the galaxy as we see fit. The Koresh made a sound like a million bees laughing at the same time, and Carter realized that these beings found her words amusing in the way that adults might find a child's tantrum entertaining. No species in this galaxy is free, except by the grace and permission of the Council, and humanity will learn this truth as all others have learned it, or humanity will cease to exist entirely. The energy being that was the Zephyrian representative pulsed brighter for a moment, and Carter felt heat wash over her face as it prepared to speak. Every species believes they are special when they first encounter the Council, and every species learns that they are not special at all, but merely another collection of primitive minds that must be guided by their betters. Carter listened to the formal charges against humanity, which included unauthorized military expansion, refusal to accept council oversight, development of prohibited technologies, and the most serious charge of all, which was inspiring other species to question council authority. The punishment was simple and had been used many times before according to the council records that they showed her on screens that appeared in the air without any visible projectors. Humanity would dismantle every military vessel larger than a personal transport, surrender all weapons technology to council oversight, accept permanent monitoring stations in every human system, and provide tribute in the form of resources and population as determined by Council needs. Carter asked what would happen if humanity refused these terms, even though she already knew the answer from the historical records they had shown her of other species that had tried to resist. The Valdari's liquid silver form rippled in what might have been amusement, and Carter felt its mind pressing against hers like cold fingers trying to get inside her skull. No species has ever been foolish enough to refuse Council demands, because no species wishes to follow the path of the architects who thought they were too advanced to submit to proper authority. Carter had never heard of the architects before, but something in the way the Council members mentioned them made her think this was important information that humanity needed to know. The meeting ended with Carter being given 72 hours to return to Earth and convince her government to accept the Council's terms, which was more time than most species received according to the Koresh representative. Carter left the crystal chamber knowing that she carried the future of humanity in her hands, and that every choice made in the next 3 days would determine whether the human race would survive as a free people or become another slave species serving Council masters. The journey back to Earth felt much longer than 14 days, even though it was exactly the same amount of time, and Carter spent every hour thinking about the impossible choice that humanity now faced. Jake Morrison received Carter's initial report while the Defiance was still traveling toward human space, and he immediately changed course for Earth, because he knew that humanity was going to need every ship and every captain ready for whatever came next. The message that Carter sent ahead to Earth was simple and direct, because there was no point in using diplomatic language when the situation was so clear. The Galactic Council has given humanity 72 hours to surrender everything that makes us human, or they will destroy us completely, and we need to decide right now what kind of species we want to be. President Alex Rodriguez stood in the emergency session room deep beneath the White House bunker, while Admiral Carter's holographic image flickered slightly due to the quantum encryption that protected their communications from any possible Council interception. The room filled with the most important people on Earth, including General Kate Sullivan, who commanded all human military forces, Dr. Nathan Cross from the Xenobiology Institute, who knew more about alien species than anyone else alive, and Director Ryan Webb from Earth Intelligence, who had been quietly gathering information about the Council for years. Carter's report lasted exactly 47 minutes, and when she finished speaking, the room remained silent for almost a full minute, because nobody wanted to be the first person to say what they were all thinking. General Sullivan broke the silence with words that cut through the tension like a sharp knife through soft cloth. They want us to become slaves, and they think we will do it willingly, because every other species in the galaxy was too scared to fight back. Dr. Cross adjusted his glasses nervously and pulled up holographic displays showing population numbers and military strength comparisons that made everyone in the room understand just how impossible their situation really was. The Council commands approximately 15 million military vessels across 1,200 star systems, while humanity has exactly 4,000 ships scattered across 23 systems, and most of our vessels are exploration ships, not warships. Director Webb leaned forward and activated his own display showing intelligence reports that his agents had been gathering throughout Council space for the past decade. What we have learned about the Council tells us something very important about how they maintain control and why they have never faced a real rebellion in all these thousands of years. The images that Webb showed made several people in the room shift uncomfortably in their chairs, because they displayed scenes of worlds where entire populations lived in conditions that made slavery look like freedom. Species after species had submitted to Council authority and had their cultures systematically destroyed until nothing remained except workers who existed only to serve Council needs and provide resources for Council projects. Webb showed them the Corvin homeworld, where a proud warrior race now worked in mining operations that stripped their planet bare, while their children were raised in Council facilities to forget their heritage completely. He showed them the Nephili ocean worlds, where beings who had once created art that could make people weep with joy now lived in underwater factories producing components for Council technology without ever seeing natural sunlight. The most disturbing images were of the Vex, who had been master engineers and builders before the Council arrived, and who now spent their lives maintaining Council equipment while pretending to be grateful for the opportunity to serve. President Rodriguez listened to each report and studied every image while his advisors argued about whether humanity could possibly survive a war against an enemy that had conquered hundreds of worlds. Some argued that submission was the only logical choice because dead humans could not preserve human culture and maybe they could find ways to resist council control from within the system. Others, led by General Sullivan, argued that humanity's greatest strength had always been the refusal to bow to tyrants, whether they came from Earth or from distant stars. The debate continued for 6 hours while the 72-hour deadline counted down, and Rodriguez knew that he was facing the most important decision in human history. Cross finally provided the information that changed everything when he activated a new display, showing intelligence that had just arrived from deep space reconnaissance missions. Our scouts have been monitoring Council communications, and we have discovered something that the Council does not want anyone to know about their true nature and their real capabilities. The data showed that Council technology was not as advanced as they claimed, and that much of their power came from psychological warfare rather than superior weapons. Webb added his own analysis showing that the Council maintained control through fear and intimidation, rather than through overwhelming technological superiority. Every species that had encountered the Council had immediately assumed that resistance was impossible and had surrendered without testing Council military capabilities in real combat. Cross revealed the most important discovery, which was that human technology had actually developed along completely different lines than Council technology, and in some areas, humans had already surpassed their supposed masters. Our faster-than-light communication systems are more efficient than anything the Council uses, and our computer networks are more sophisticated than their centralized control systems. Sullivan immediately understood the implications and began explaining how this technological advantage could be used in military situations. If we can coordinate our forces better than they can coordinate theirs, then numbers become less important than tactics and speed of response, Rodriguez asked. The question that everyone was thinking, but nobody wanted to voice. What happens to Earth if we fight and lose because they will not show mercy to a species that dared to resist their authority? Webb answered with intelligence reports showing what had happened to other species that had tried to resist Council demands. The few species that attempted rebellion were not just conquered, but completely eliminated, with their worlds turned into warning examples for other species to see. Rodriguez walked to the window that looked out over the underground facility and thought about the billions of people living their lives on the surface who had no idea that their entire future was being decided in this room. When he turned back to face the assembled leaders, his expression showed that he had already made his decision. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communication system, asking for Earth's official response to the Council ultimatum. Rodriguez looked at each person in the room and saw his own determination reflected in their faces. We are Americans and we are humans and we have never bowed to tyrants, and we will not start now regardless of where those tyrants come from. He activated the communication system that would broadcast his words not just to Carter but to every human settlement in the galaxy. The United States of America and the entire human race reject the demands of the Galactic Council, and we will defend our freedom with everything we have. Sullivan immediately began issuing orders to mobilize every human military asset, while Cross started coordinating with scientists to develop new weapons based on their technological advantages. Webb activated sleeper agents throughout Council space to begin gathering real-time intelligence about Council military movements and weaknesses. Rodriguez made one final statement that would be remembered throughout human history. We choose to fight not because we think we can win, but because some things are worth dying for, and freedom is the most important thing of all. The message reached Captain Morrison aboard the Defiance just as Council scout ships began appearing on long-range sensors throughout human space. Morrison read the President's message to his crew and watched as every face on his bridge showed the same expression of determination mixed with fear. Jake knew that they were probably going to die in the coming war, but he also knew that they were going to make the Council pay a price that would make every other species in the galaxy understand that humans were different. The 72-hour deadline expired exactly 18 minutes after Rodriguez's broadcast, and the first Council attack ships crossed into human space near the outer colonies. The war that would reshape the galaxy had begun with humanity standing alone against an empire that had ruled unchallenged for thousands of years. Captain Morrison stared at the massive derelict ship floating dead in space among the asteroids, while his crew ran every scanner they had, trying to understand what they were looking at. Chief Engineer Maria Santos reported that the vessel was definitely not built by any known species, and the metal it was made from contained elements that did not appear on any periodic table that humans had ever seen. Dr. Helen Foster worked frantically at her linguistics station, trying to decode the strange symbols carved into the hull of the mysterious ship, while Commander Paul Grant prepared his boarding team for what might be the most important discovery in human history. The ship had appeared on their sensors 3 days after the first Council attacks began, and Morrison had made the decision to investigate even though it meant taking the Defiance away from the main battle lines. Santos discovered that the derelict was still generating power after what appeared to be thousands of years floating in space, and the energy readings were unlike anything human science had encountered before. Foster finally managed to translate some of the symbols, and what she found made her call Morrison to her station immediately. Captain, these markings match references we found in the Council archives about something called the Architects. But according to Council records, the Architects went extinct over 10,000 years ago. Grant led his boarding party through an airlock that opened for them automatically, as if the ship had been waiting for visitors, and inside they found corridors that seemed to stretch on forever. The technology they discovered made even their most advanced human equipment look primitive, and Santos realized that everything the Council claimed about their superior technology was based on crude copies of these architect designs. Morrison followed the boarding party into the ship and found himself standing in a vast chamber filled with holographic displays that activated when he approached them. The ship's artificial intelligence came online slowly like an old man waking from a very long sleep, and when it spoke, the words appeared directly in their minds using translation methods that were far more advanced than anything humans had developed. Foster worked with the AI to piece together the true history of the galaxy, and what she learned changed everything. They thought they knew about the Council and about humanity itself. The Architects had been the galaxy's greatest civilization with technology that allowed them to travel between dimensions and create matter from pure energy. But they had refused to share their knowledge with younger species who wanted to use it for conquest. The Council had originally been 3 minor species that served the Architects as assistants and guards, but they had grown jealous of Architect power and had begun secretly copying their technology while planning betrayal. When the Architects discovered the Council's treachery, they had tried to stop them peacefully, but the Council had already convinced dozens of other species that the Architects were dangerous tyrants who needed to be overthrown. The war that followed had lasted for centuries and had ended with the apparent extinction of the Architects and the rise of the Council as the galaxy's new masters using stolen technology they barely understood. Morrison asked the AI why it was telling them this story and what it had to do with humanity's current situation. AI's response shocked everyone in the boarding party because it revealed something about human origins that nobody had ever suspected. The final group of Architects had escaped the genocide by fleeing to a remote spiral arm of the galaxy where they had crash-landed on a primitive world inhabited by early humans. Over thousands of years, the surviving Architects had intermarried with humans, and their genetic legacy had been passed down through generations until it became part of human DNA itself. Foster realized that this explained why humans had developed so differently from other species and why their technology had evolved along unique paths that the Council did not understand. Santos discovered that the ship's databases contained complete technical specifications for Architect technology, including weapon systems that could give humanity a real chance against the Council. Fleets Grant found something even more important in the ship's historical records, which were detailed accounts of every species the Council had conquered and enslaved, including their current locations and the methods used to keep them under control. The AI explained that it had been waiting for the Architect descendants to return and reclaim their heritage, but it had never expected them to look so different from the original Architects. Morrison understood that humanity was not just fighting for their own freedom, but for the freedom of every species in the galaxy that had been oppressed by the Council for thousands of years. The ship's manufacturing systems were still functional and could produce weapons and equipment based on Architect designs, but only if operated by beings with architect genetic markers, which meant only humans could use them. Foster worked with the AI to send encrypted messages to human settlements throughout the galaxy, sharing the technical data and historical information they had discovered. Santos began the process of downloading architect weapon designs, while Grant coordinated with Earth Command to prepare for a completely different kind of war than anyone had planned. The most important discovery came when the AI revealed that there were other architect ships hidden throughout the galaxy waiting for activation by their genetic descendants. Morrison realized that humanity's rebellion could become something much larger if they could wake up these sleeping vessels and unite the oppressed species against their council masters. The AI warned them that the council would do everything possible to prevent this knowledge from spreading, because the truth about their stolen technology and brutal history would destroy their authority over the galaxy. Grant received reports that council forces were massing for a major assault on Earth, and that humanity needed every advantage they could get if they hoped to survive the coming battle. Morrison made the decision that would change the course of the war by ordering the AI to begin awakening every architect ship it could contact while broadcasting the true history of the galaxy to every species under council control. The message that went out from the ancient ship carried more than just words, because it included genetic activation, codes that would allow other species to access hidden memories passed down through their own DNA. Santos reported that 3 more architect vessels had already responded to the activation signal and were powering up after millennia of dormancy. Foster decoded a message from one of the awakening ships that revealed its location near Corvin space, where the warrior species might be ready to join a rebellion if they learned the truth about their enslavement. Morrison ordered the Defiance to begin a dangerous journey through council-controlled space to make contact with potential allies, while Earth prepared for the final battle. The ancient AI's last message before they departed contained a warning that echoed through the ship's corridors, like the voice of ghosts demanding justice. The council believes that the architects are gone forever, but they are wrong, because the architect spirit lives on in humanity, and now the time has come for the descendants to reclaim what was stolen and free the galaxy from 10,000 years of tyranny. Lieutenant Commander Sam Parker crouched behind the twisted metal wreckage on the Corvin mining station, while explosions shook the asteroid facility and made dust rain down from the ceiling above his head. The message he carried from humanity could either start a galaxy-wide rebellion or get him killed by Corvin workers who had been taught to hate all outsiders by their council overseers. Parker had volunteered for this mission because he understood that winning the war against the council would require more than just human courage and determination. His team had spent 2 weeks infiltrating the mining operation by disguising themselves as equipment technicians, and they had learned that the Corvin people still remembered their warrior heritage despite decades of council brainwashing. The Corvin supervisor named Kral worked alongside Parker without knowing his true identity, but Parker could see the anger burning in the alien's eyes every time council guards gave orders. When Parker finally revealed himself as a human ambassador, Kral's reaction was not what he had expected, because instead of calling for guards, the Corvin warrior gripped his arm and whispered words that changed everything. "We have been waiting for someone brave, enough to fight the council, and we always hoped it would be humans because you are the only species that seems as stubborn as we used to be." Dr. Foster worked from her station aboard the Defiance to establish communication with the aquatic Nephili on their ocean world, and the response she received made her realize that the rebellion was spreading faster than anyone had dared to hope. The Nephili had maintained secret communication networks beneath their seas and had been sharing forbidden art and literature that kept their culture alive despite council attempts to destroy it. Foster's message about the true history of the galaxy reached Nephili communities across 12 ocean worlds, and within hours she began receiving replies that contained offers of support and coordination. The most crucial contact came when the team established communication with the Vex, who had been pretending to be simple technicians, while secretly maintaining and improving all council technology throughout the galaxy. The Vex leader, who called himself Builder, spoke through encrypted channels that even the council could not monitor, and his words revealed how deep the potential rebellion really went. "We have been sabotaging council equipment for generations, but we could never risk open revolt until now, because we needed someone else to start the fight," Morrison coordinated the growing alliance from the Defiance, while Council forces continued their advance toward Earth, and he realized that timing would be critical to the success of their desperate plan. The awakened architect ships had begun appearing throughout the galaxy, and each activation sent new waves of genetic memories through species that had forgotten their true origins. Parker led a joint strike team of humans and Corvins against a Council supply depot, and discovered that the enemy was not prepared for coordinated attacks by multiple species working together. The Council had built their entire military strategy around fighting, one species at a time, and their centralized command structure could not adapt quickly to simultaneous uprisings across hundreds of worlds. Foster received intelligence from the Nephilim that revealed something shocking about Council military capabilities. Because their ocean surveillance networks had been tracking Council ship movements for decades, the Council fleets were powerful, but they were also spread thin across the galaxy, and most of their ships were occupied with suppressing subject populations, rather than fighting actual wars. Builder and his Vex engineers provided the most valuable intelligence of all, when they revealed that they could remotely disable key systems on Council vessels at exactly the right moment during battle. Morrison realized that humanity's rebellion had become something much larger and more dangerous than the Council had anticipated, because they were now facing a coordinated uprising by dozens of species. The battle plan that emerged from these secret negotiations was ambitious and risky, but it offered the only real chance for success against an enemy that had never faced organized resistance. Earth's defenses were strengthened by technology shared from the awakened architect ships, while human fleets prepared for a fighting retreat that would draw Council forces into carefully prepared traps. Parker coordinated with Corvin warriors to launch simultaneous attacks on Council installations throughout their territory, while Foster worked with Nephilim commanders to disrupt underwater Council facilities. The Vex prepared to begin their sabotage campaign that would cripple Council ships at the critical moment when human forces launched their counterattack. Captain Danny Wright commanded the new human battle fleet aboard the USS Liberty, which had been upgraded with architect technology that made it more powerful than anything the Council had seen. Morrison received reports that 36 species had joined the rebellion, and that Council forces were struggling to maintain order in sectors they had controlled without challenge for thousands of years. The critical moment came when Council Primarch Zalak demanded humanity's immediate surrender and offered one final chance to avoid total destruction. Admiral Carter's response was broadcast across the galaxy from Luna Station, where human forces had gathered for the final battle. Humanity kneels to no one, and today we remind the galaxy what freedom looks like. The words triggered coordinated attacks throughout Council space as rebel forces struck simultaneously at targets that had been carefully selected to maximize damage, while minimizing civilian casualties. Morrison watched from the Defiance as the first Council ships appeared on long-range sensors, approaching Earth, and he knew that everything they had worked for would be decided in the next few hours. The Rebel Alliance had managed to achieve something that had seemed impossible just weeks before, because they had united dozens of species in common cause against their oppressors. Parker's Corvin allies hit Council supply lines, just as the enemy fleets were entering human space, which meant that reinforcements and resupply would be difficult or impossible. Foster's Nephilim contacts launched attacks on underwater Council facilities that disrupted communication networks across 17 star systems. Builder's Vex saboteurs began their electronic warfare campaign that caused Council ships to experience mysterious system failures. At exactly the wrong moments, Wright's battle fleet emerged from behind Luna, with weapons that fired energy beams unlike anything the Council had encountered, and ship designs that moved with impossible grace and speed. The Battle of Luna began when the first Council ships opened fire on human defenses and discovered that the species they had expected to crush was ready to fight back with weapons they did not understand. Morrison realized, as the battle unfolded, that they were not just fighting for human survival but for the freedom of every species in the galaxy that had suffered under Council tyranny. The descendants of the architects had finally returned to reclaim their legacy, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Council fleet that emerged from hyperspace near Earth was the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, with over 2 million ships arranged in perfect formation that stretched across the entire solar system. Captain Wright watched from the bridge of the USS Liberty as the enemy vessels moved into attack position, and he felt a moment of doubt about whether their small fleet could possibly survive against such overwhelming numbers. Primarch Zalak's voice echoed across all communication channels with words that had ended the resistance of every other species in the galaxy for 10,000 years. Surrender now and accept merciful enslavement, or watch your world burn as an example to any species foolish enough to defy Council authority. Admiral Carter's response came from Luna Command and was broadcast to every ship in both fleets as well as to listening posts throughout the galaxy. Today the galaxy learns that some species cannot be conquered because freedom lives in our hearts and no tyrant can kill an idea whose time has come. The first shots fired in the Battle of Luna came from Council dreadnoughts that unleashed energy weapons capable of cracking planets, but the human ships that should have been vaporized simply vanished from their targeting systems. Wright's fleet used Architect stealth technology that made them invisible to Council sensors, while they maneuvered into positions that Council tactical computers had calculated were impossible to achieve. Morrison commanded the Defiance as part of a strike force that attacked the Council command ship directly, while the main fleet engaged enemy forces trying to reach Earth. The Architect weapons proved their superiority when human ships began destroying Council vessels with single shots that cut through shields and armor that had been considered impenetrable. Zalak realized too late that he was not fighting primitive humans with crude technology, but the genetic descendants of the species that had created the very weapons his people had stolen. Throughout the galaxy, the coordinated rebellion reached its peak as Corvan warriors led by Parker captured Council administrative centers, while Nephili forces disabled underwater installations. The Vex sabotage campaign reached critical mass when Builder's people simultaneously shut down life support systems on 3,000 Council ships, forcing them to withdraw from combat, foster coordinated communications between the rebel forces, and realize that the galaxy-wide uprising had already succeeded in liberating over 400 worlds from Council control. The turning point of the space battle came when Morrison led his boarding party onto Zalak's flagship and discovered that the Council leader had been trying to activate a weapon that would destroy Earth's sun. The ancient device was another piece of stolen Architect technology, but Morrison's genetic heritage allowed him to override the controls and turn the weapon against the Council fleet instead. Wright pressed his advantage by leading the human fleet in a direct assault on the remaining Council dreadnoughts using tactics that combined human creativity with Architect technology. The enemy ships that had seemed invincible began falling one by one as their commanders realized that they were facing an opponent they did not understand and could not defeat. Morrison confronted Zalak in the flagship's command center, and the ancient Primarch looked at him with eyes that showed fear for the first time in millennia. How did we not see what you truly were, and why did we not recognize the return of the Architects until it was too late to stop you? The final battle took place as hand-to-hand combat spread through the Council flagship, while outside the space battle reached its climax with human forces driving the enemy into full retreat. Morrison defeated Zalak in single combat using skills that came from genetic memories passed down through countless generations of human ancestors who carried Architect blood. The Primarch's death was broadcast throughout the galaxy and marked the end of 10,000 years of Council tyranny as rebel forces celebrated victory on hundreds of worlds. Wright's fleet pursued the retreating Council ships and discovered that most enemy commanders were surrendering rather than face destruction by weapons they could not match. The aftermath of the Battle of Luna saw Council forces throughout the galaxy laying down their arms as the authority that had kept the galaxy in chains crumbled in a matter of hours. Morrison returned to Earth as a hero, but he knew that the real work was just beginning, because winning the war was easier than building a lasting peace. President Rodriguez addressed the galaxy from the rebuilt halls of what had once been the Council chambers on Zentara Prime with words that established a new era. We fought not to become conquerors, but to prove that freedom is possible. And today we establish the Galactic Federation where every species stands as equals. The new government that emerged from the rebellion was based on voluntary cooperation rather than forced submission, and every member species retained the right to govern themselves. Carter became the first president of the Galactic Federation, and her first act was to release all historical records about the true nature of Council rule and the crimes committed against subject species. Parker worked with Corvin leaders to rebuild their warrior culture, while Foster helped the Nephilim establish art schools that would preserve their creative heritage for future generations. Builder and the Vex became the Federation's chief engineers and began developing new technologies that combined the best ideas from every member species. Wright commanded the new Federation fleet that was created not for conquest, but for exploration and defense of the growing alliance of free worlds. 5 years after, the Battle of Luna, Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel UES Horizon and watched as human and alien crews worked together to map unknown regions of the galaxy. The descendants of the architects had reclaimed their heritage not through violence alone but through the most human of all qualities, which was the willingness to fight for principles rather than personal gain. Dr. Cross made the final entry in the official history of the rebellion from his office at the new Galactic University, where students from dozens of species studied together. Today marks the anniversary of the day humanity refused to bow, and in doing so reminded the galaxy that freedom is not a gift that can be given or taken, but a right that belongs to every thinking being. The galaxy had been transformed from a prison ruled by tyrants into a community of free peoples working together to explore the infinite possibilities that lay among the stars. Morrison looked out at the vast universe that stretched before them and knew that the greatest adventures for humanity and their new allies were still waiting to be discovered. The war was over, but the real journey of building a better galaxy had only just begun, and the spirit that had driven humans to refuse submission would guide them through whatever challenges lay ahead in the endless frontier of space.